Okay, it's great to be back. As long as then my absence hasn't meant that the technology is no longer working. So you know, those that have been here before, that I'm always paranoid about the tech working. So you've got to let me know. Can you hear me okay? Is it working? First, points and prizes to those who can let me know on the chat whether you can hear me or not. I'm Jack Chew. This is Chewing It Over, and we come to you live 12:30 till 1 o'clock weekdays, except for recent weeks. So I've been off for a bit, haven't I? And I'm sure many of you have been celebrating that fact, especially those that have been tuning into people like Leanne's episode. She was on yesterday. Brilliant episode, no doubt. I haven't listened back to it yet, I want to admit, but she always keeps standards high and has been holding the fort well, as have some of the others. But yeah, I've been off for a few weeks, and what have we been up to? I'm sure I'll tell you that. But more of that in other episodes. But basically, we've made a big play. Look at my little mask bracelet. That's what I have. I keep the mask for when I have to wander off into the clinic. That's nice. We have been making a big play into the sort of fitness industry, trying to educate fitness professionals, personal trainers, gym bunnies, that sort of thing, gym owners. And we did so at the Arnold Sports Festival. So I'm going to tell you more about that another time, because the episode that I really wanted to do, which is good for us to burst back on the scenes, and another reason why it's been slightly delayed is because we've been crunching the numbers, especially Felicity Thau has been working hard on this, but also Michael Schumacher and team put together the original survey. We worked out what questions to ask you. Many of you, over 600 of you, in fact, responded to what was a lengthy state of the industry type survey that we did, I think, beginning of September, if not end of August. And so I'm going to go through those results with you, which I think were really fascinating and interesting. Thank you so much to Liz Bailey, who said she can hear me loud and clear and that she's missed me. That's nice. Thank you. Really appreciate that, Liz. I'm sure you'll be disagreed with promptly by someone saying, "What are you doing back?" I need a shave, don't I? What's that about? That's not on purpose, by the way. It's just me being a lazy hobo. I did get a bit poorly, so I was meant to be back on last week, and then I got a bit poorly. I'm still a little bit nasal, but I've certainly stopped vomiting, which is nice. So that wouldn't have been pleasant all over the microphone, would it? So let me get on with it then. Let me tell you a little bit about this survey. Hope you've all been well. Hope you feel you can join in as ever on Tune It Over. I really want your participation, although this will be a bit more of a content dump. But I will be definitely asking questions as we go along as to whether or not any of this surprises you. It has done. Some of it surprised me. But you're going to get my opinions woven into this. If you responded to our survey, if you're one of the over 600 people that spent half an hour putting this together and giving us your feedback, then you will get a full report of it tomorrow. We're sending it out to you on email, and it's a really nice report. It gives you a nice, subjective, objective analysis of what we've found and what we've learned from it, which is brilliant that Flick's put together. But this is a bit of a whistle-stop tour of it. And so as I tell you put stuff and put graphics up and I share my opinion, then please do join in and get back to me on it. I'll be hiding the chat at times because I need to pull the graphics up, but then please do get involved. Really interested to know your thoughts. Because what we did is we asked various different questions. The State of the MSK Industry Survey, we called it. We asked much of our audience over the course of a couple of weeks to join us on a URL and share their thoughts, and we're really pleased with the response rate. Now, the first question that we asked is, what do you do? What sector are you in, type thing, right? So this was interesting because this is quite a nice balance in many ways, especially because a good portion of the higher education lecturers, uni lecturers and educators also were simultaneously NHS clinicians, which was interesting. So it ended up being on balance, a balanced survey between private and NHS clinicians in MSK. We noticed as well, because we're not just a physio educator, we also had people that were, I think for physiotherapists, there were more NHS physiotherapists than private ones. But then when you get sports rehabbers and sports therapists and soft tissue therapists and osteopaths and that sort of thing, that then meant it ended up being fairly well represented for private practice as well. And then you've got things like policymakers, researchers, students, etc. So it's quite a nice little sample. That was pleased with that. We asked you, what is the biggest issue in MSK right now? And this was the result. I think one of the most interesting things was that no one said COVID disruption. But then I think when you look further down, you will notice that things like virtual versus face-to-face, or how well valued we're being by insurers. These get coloured by the pandemic, as most things do in our world right now, and therefore, I think it's interesting that literally no one said that, but we also could have done a ranked choice voting type thing. I think that would have been interesting. I think we should, maybe if people have been able to select like their top three, that would have been interesting. And so lesson learned from us. But yeah, interesting, isn't it? Recruitment and workforce issues come in top, no surprise. And I'll talk a little more about that. But unwarranted clinical variation is there, and interesting how concerned you all are about that. Undervalued by insurers, and I think I would always make this case, but I want to make my first opinion of the day is I think those things are linked. I think unwarranted clinical variation is only contributing to our being undervalued by insurers, and they're struggling to demonstrate our credibility when we're so varied in our practice, and not varied in an interesting and edgy way because we're all different, but varied because there's genuinely one person sees two therapists and gets completely conflicting information is not cool. Interprofessional conflicts are there, as is sort of misrepresentation in the media. So I've always got a take on that. Interesting that the things that many people in primary care and certainly the CSP and others have been talking about first contact practice. It's up there, over 100 of you saying that is the biggest issue, but certainly lower down our list, and not an exhaustive list, of course. We actually picked some categories based on a preliminary feedback pre-survey. And then institutional education, that's fairly relevantly high. I mean, it's still lowest on our list, but still pretty high when presented with that list. Some people felt that the institutional education system is lacking, and we did want to just jump onto. We did ask that question as a follow-up. Are MSK higher education courses fit for purpose? And that's then, of course, I wish we'd have differentiated undergraduate versus postgraduate, so like master's programs and stuff like that, but unfortunately, whilst the largest number of people said unsure, as far as I can see, more people said no than yes. There's a distrust. Now, of course, you've got the audience sample issue here with a Physio Matters crowd, and who follows us on social media, who might have seen a link to the survey, that sort of thing. But as you'll see later, this isn't like a devoted long-term Physio Matters audience. I think that's one of the things that I want to mention in a second, is that this is an interesting sample that's not just about our devotees, and therefore you could argue that as a digital education provider, it might be that we're overrepresented for people who are skeptics of the old system being, say, institutional education, of which you then qualify and aspire to further credentialing from various different state institutions and universities. But yeah, what did I want to show you? I just said about, I think we asked, this is later in the survey, we asked whether Physio Matters as standards have changed over the years. And one of the things that I really was pleased about, of course, here is that some argued that standards had improved, some argue standards have been maintained. Only a few said that standards had slipped. Some people said they never rated it anyway, which I enjoyed because that's good. It shows that it's not just a happy clappy survey. Of course, that's absolutely fine. I'm glad people are there to give their critique. But then also, we looked at the fact that there's some that were only recently aware of us, which I was really pleased with, because if you think about the fact that then this survey might have been seen to be biased towards it being like just Physio Matters fanboys and fangirls and people that just support our work and therefore are critics of anything that we're critics of, and that there's a bandwagon effect to mine or our opinions. It's nice, therefore, that some were only recently aware of it. When we track that data, it's anonymous, of course, but it's like if you track the links to who clicked the survey links, or what data tag clicked that survey link, and things like that. It seems that a lot of those people have only come to know us in the last couple of years because of the Therapy Live events, and therefore they're not able to throw back 5 to 8 years or whatever it is for those that have been following along for Physio Matters for longer. So the only recently aware crowd seem to have been aware of us only over the last couple of years, which seems to have helped with Therapy Live. And so therefore those that accused us of being an echo chamber because of that, I think it shows that did not, it only expanded our chamber. It certainly didn't just speak to all the same people, which is good. So yeah, let me pause there for a second and say, does any of that surprise you so far? What's your opinion? Do you feel that standards have been able to be maintained across things like Physio Matters as content? I'd include this within it as well. You certainly include my work on Tune It Over as part of that. But yeah, and Therapy Live and Exit, all that sort of stuff. Yeah, do you feel that there's any standard slippage, progress, anything like that? Also, what do you think of the priorities? You know, how do your priorities lie up with that? Did you complete the survey, and do you agree with these bits here, especially at the bottom? Unwarranted clinical variation, undervalued by insurers, recruitment, workforce issues, etc. I think valuation, I think I kind of kick myself for not linking that to just general pay evaluation, although we did do a bit more on that as well. And what's your opinion on higher education institutions? You know, are they fit for purpose is the question that we asked. Now it starts to get a little bit more interesting, I would say, and a bit more spicy, a bit more controversial. We asked who were the leaders in the MSK industry, or do you recognise any leaders in the MSK industry? I'm jumping about a bit, it's not in order, but we gave a free text and have created word clouds here. What organisations people felt were leaders in the MSK industry? So it wasn't individuals, it was organisations. And so it was pleasing, of course, to see our name in amongst it, especially because that's not really our declared job. Some people rating the CSP, MSCP, the NHS. I think that's a really relevant one, whereby the NHS is still a seal of quality, and that's very assuring as supporters, of course, of the NHS. You've got MSKR in there, Connect Health up there, things like iFont I can notice as well as then some of the smaller associations, ISRM, you know, quite high considering their size, SMA. I think you've got Physio First there as well. They seem to be doing well, as well as our Aussie cousins, Clinical Edge, fellow podcasters as well. Really pleasing to see their names in there. Two things I want to make you aware of here is that a lot of people said none, and a lot of people said unsure. And then in the free text, which isn't really captured very well by a word cloud, is unfortunately people were then deciding to riff about how they were frustrated at a dearth of leadership. And this is one of the problems with word clouds, is because some of this, I mean, I found one comment, you know, there's plenty of comments here where people are sort of describing their frustration with some of the organizations that are on here, and then it gets represented as if it's a positive answer. And that's something that we need to try to sometimes, it's hard to know what to do with that data because you're just creating a bit of a word cloud trying to get a visual representation of those answers. You know, we asked who the leaders were in the MSK industry, and when people say anyone but the MACP or Physio Matters should do better, which we had both of those things. You know, I'm not just saying it's like the people that are there that we've been critics of before. I mean, I've been a compliment. I've given compliments and criticisms to pretty much all of these organisations, including our own. But it's just that more. Can you imagine that there are? Well, that's a good example. That people saying Physio Matters could do better, and they give examples of how. They've not answered the question, but it would be represented in the word cloud, and that's one of the things that's a bit of a downside. And that same applies to this next one, which was we asked, who would you like to hear more from? Was the question, I'm pretty sure. Oh no, before we get there, I'm getting carried away. You see, we asked, what would they like to see discussed more, and what would you like to be discussed less? And that was more topics and themes. Now, we used a slightly different word cloud thing because you needed to sort of merge when people put plurals or similar things. You know, this was a better aggregator. So we used a different, word cloud generator. But this was what people said when they were asked what topics would they like to see more of, hear more of. And yeah, bigger is more popular. People want to hear more from patients, absolutely, and that's great. And we definitely have intention to continue to weave patients into all of our work, as well as then if you haven't listened back to the Patient Matters series or seen patients that are present across all of our events, then please do. More planned in that direction. More evidence, love that. More about treatment. I thought that was interesting. If you see treatment there, I can't see if there is anyone that said assessment, or well, it could have, even a few dozen could have said assessment. It might not have been represented here because obviously this was of 650, whatever it was, people. Pain, MSK, communication, exercise prescription, clinical reasoning. So yeah, music to my ears. One of the things that's really interesting to me is that you've then got people, what do you want to hear more of? And people want to hear more manual therapy discussions and more, what else is there that I wanted to mention? People want to hear more about, manual therapy techniques you see at the bottom as well there. But if you notice, what do you want to hear less of? It just shows, loads of people said they want to hear less about the hands-on, hands-off debate. They want to hear less about manual therapy. They want to hear less about specific modality treatments. They want to hear less about, say, passive modalities, less about acupuncture, therapy versus exercise, debate in manual therapy, criticisms of modalities. This is what's interesting. So it's hard for us to know what to read from this, because are people saying they want to hear less about modalities, or is it they're saying they want to hear less criticism of modalities? They want to hear less about exercise, some people. The exclusion of anything, I like that. That's interesting, because it wouldn't appear if it wasn't if it was only one person. There's a few people that have clearly said that. There's some people that have said that they don't want to hear more. They want to hear less criticism of MSK. There's people that do want to just everything to be inherently positive without the critique, which is fair enough as well. But yeah, what I think is particularly interesting is that if you look at that, it shows how divided some of this is that you've got manual therapy featuring prominently in both camps, right? They want to hear more and less. Probably not the same people. But yeah, what are your opinions on that? What are your thoughts? Those that are tuning in live, feel free to join in, weigh in. I know what you like. Your last 5 minutes, you're going to give me more comments than I can post, and so please do join in now, and we can weave you into the chatter. Does any of this surprise you? Does it apply to you? You're here, you're with me live. Get your opinions out for the lads. Let me hear what you're thinking. We asked who, as individuals, were positive influences. Did we say? I don't think we said individuals actually, did we? Let me just have a look. We said, which individuals and organisations are the most positive influences in the MSK industry? So we're quite pleased, of course. I was chuffed enough to see my name, albeit by a sample. I get that. MSKR's up there, of course. Physio Matters front and centre, which is brilliant. And of course, you might well have just been brown nose and us. You're filling out a Physio Matters survey, biased audience. Get that. But it was pleasing all the same. NOI in Australia, fantastic pain resource by Dave Butler and Lauren Mosley originally. I think it's Dave Butler's group now. Then you've got, let's pick of the rest, that CSP's on there, MSCP's on there, Armour's on there. Same applies really, including with my name and Physio Matters and MSKR and stuff, is that some people use the free text to sort of riff about who they felt was strong and who could do better, even though the next question was who is a bad influence. And so it does get a bit conflated. But I was pleased to see as well Therapy Live on there. And it's something that word clouds are a bit of a shame, because you've got MSKR and MSK Reform there separate, when you probably aggregate them as being the same organisation, of course, and obviously one that we're proud to have supported in its infancy. Then you've got some individuals. So look up at the top there. You've got Andrew Jaggi, Greg Lehman, Ben Cormack, Pete O'Sullivan, Tom Goom. Then you've got Adam Meekins, Joe Gibson. I don't know. Am I neck and neck with Joe there for which is the largest name, the most frequently cited? But you look at Peter O'Sullivan and Pete O'Sullivan separate on this word cloud, which means that therefore that might have been massive. Greg Lehman, and then Lehman, there's a word is there. I noticed Meekins and Adam Meekins is two separate ones. So maybe it'd be hard to know who's the most influential name that's been put in there. But also you've got people like Jack March, James Noak, Eric Meara, you can see. So there's some individuals in there, and just some of my favourite people: Andrew Cuff, Jim Oliver, David Poulter, just absolutely brilliant thinkers. Who is Matt Phillips? I see Matt Phillips there as well. Oh, amazing people. And so I couldn't agree more. They are absolute class act and positive influences within the MSK industry. However, much like this, which was what do you want to hear more of, what do you want to hear less of, we then end up having a really interesting thing where, because some people and some organizations are Marmite, you end up with this happening where, you know, the positive influences, you've got, I'm sure I did see the CSP. Oh, no, okay. Sorry. I thought the CSP was on here. MACP is on there, but then the CSP are seen as being a negative influence within the MSK industry, remembering that the CSP represents all physiotherapists in the chartered physiotherapists in the UK, and so yeah, not necessarily just for them on the MSK front. Twitter seen as being a real negative, which is interesting, and certainly something for us to reflect on and learn from. You've got things like social media, and particularly the media, you know, the media and the wider media, especially when you unpack some of these comments to beyond just words, of course. And this is what the report does, is it breaks down some examples as to what that represents. And the mainstream media, print media, radio, TV, that sort of thing, is seen as being such a negative influence that we, lots of you asking us to get involved in that. You see that the HCPC are seen as being a negative influence as well. People, you see the word professed is there because people say self-professed experts, self-professed gurus. You see gurus over on that right side. Some people that mentioned specific, not necessarily specific people, although I'll talk about that person in a minute that you can see or who's definitely there. But yeah, chiropractor or chiropractic and stuff like that. People deciding to point fingers at specific, I'm not I'm saying they shouldn't have done, by the way, but specific professions. But yeah, one of the things that's interesting then, if you look at this, you've got things like Adam Meakin's pretty prevalent in the positive influences within MSK. And then, of course, as a person, he's also there as seen as being a negative influence. You see on that right-hand side and on the bottom right as well. It appears, I don't know why, there must be a difference in space or something, or a typo. Mr. Marmite, okay. And I think that's one of the issues why we are divided, is that people do, you've got some people on this survey, probably not the same people, that consider Adam, and we could insert other influential people in there. No doubt I've got me. I hear from plenty of me haters, but it didn't appear on this survey, which is good. But there are people that just end up sort of dividing opinion. And so there are people that consider Adam to be a really positive influence, and then people that consider him to be a negative influence, much like these people, probably some of the same people that want to hear more about the critique of modalities in a manual therapy. And then there's some that want to hear less of that, and they're just sick of it, and they feel that, and I imagine the people that are sick of that are then people that consider when Adam raises it, because he sees it as being a core issue, because he said, if you go to first principles, what are our interventions? What do we think we're doing to people? How much do we balance active versus passive treatment? I imagine that then grates on them. But to me, this is really useful information, and one that I think it can inform future priorities and decision making. But certainly something that we obviously want to have positive influence on the health of the nation and health beyond the nation. And so many thanks to not just those of you that completed it, but also hats off to those that are mentioned in here, and well done for some great work. Really pleased. One of the two questions that we asked, which were interesting: do you consider the NHS to be a reliable provider of quality MSK care? Now, look how split that is. Pretty much even three ways. No is slightly higher. The most common answer was no. And unsure and yes were sort of neck and neck. I think yes slightly higher than unsure, if we had the numbers attached to it. I'm sorry, we don't. But we also then asked this, which is, do you consider the private sector to reliably provide quality MSK care? Now, if we put these, I'm going to flip these back and forth. You can see that they're not dissimilar, but fewer people said a blunt no to the private sector, but more people said unsure. And then the yes is the most similar. Yeah, so that's NHS, private. Now, one of the things that was fascinating when I picked into this a little bit more this morning, so I was doing this, I wanted to reread the report and stuff like that and get your take on it, is that I then wondered, is it that then the NHS clinicians, which were about half, were positively rating the NHS and then deemed negative about the private practice, and then vice versa, those that were in private practice were suggesting that the NHS aren't a reliable provider of MSK quality care, and vice versa? Wasn't the case. No, probably pretty even. You had some of that, but then you also had some that were working in the NHS and just considered it to not be a provider of quality care. And then vice versa, you had the people that in private practice, they work in private practice. In another question, which I'm going to come to next because it's important, they said that they felt they enjoyed their job and they liked their career choice and stuff like that, but they didn't rate the sector of which they worked in for delivering quality care. So it just shows so much room for improvement. Now, this is what I wanted to show you, and this is definitely one that you're going to need to get into the small print of. I'm sorry you might not be able to read it. I will read it for you just to indicate what it is you're looking at. But we're just going to spend a couple of minutes on this because it's interesting. Some of my favourite questions on this, and therefore worth highlighting because I certainly learned a lot, and it pushes against some of the things that I've been saying on this show in recent months. We asked on a scale of 0 to 10, with 0 being not at all and 10 being extremely so. So it's kind of, we had to pivot it around a neutral point, and the way that it's been visually represented is by colour, in which the left-hand side, where it's the reds, are then the negative and the blues are the positive. But how comfortable would you be referring to another MSK professional in another area that you've no knowledge of? So it's this idea of someone saying, oh, your auntie lives somewhere far afield, and saying, do you know a good physio? And instead of saying, no, I'm not going to pick a physio, just refer you to the local X. How confident would you be? And you guys are pretty confident. You know, it was certainly lots of 10 answers, and then most of you, it was skewed towards the positive. And admittedly, you know, that's something that I've talked about a lot on this show, is that my take on it and how I actually deal with those sorts of inquiries is I try and find a person, because I feel like I'm tossing a coin a little bit when you're thinking about that consistency that we're looking for quality. How fulfilled, the second question, so next one down, how fulfilled do you feel by your career? And then look how positive that is. You know, very few negative and neutral there, which is really promising. Still some work to do there. You know, there's quite a lot of people, you know, over 100 of you that aren't, and that's a concern for me, don't get me wrong, but I'm pleased to see that being positive. How appropriately do you feel you're paid for your expertise? And then this is really interesting as well, clear undervaluation in your opinion as to whether or not you feel that you're appropriately paid, and that's something that I would certainly agree with, and that value piece that speaks to what we're saying about insurers, etc., I think is relevant. Value comes up in the next one, which is the sort of fourth one down, so second from the bottom, if you can't read it closely enough, but yeah, just look at the visual. How valued do you feel your expertise is by society at large? And this was more balanced than I expected. You know, this was something that is, I mean, one of the things I have a bit of a beef with, I don't think necessarily MSK clinicians and MSK practice is recognised as being as important as it is by society at large. I think that there's not a lot of kudos that necessarily surrounds the role. But you guys disagree to some degree. You know, there's still plenty on either side of the line, but you know, it was more positive than negative. So I'm really pleased that you guys do feel valued, and that I need to reflect and understand that my opinions aren't necessarily with the majority there. The bottom one is, how well do you feel staff within the MSK industry represent the demographic diversity of the general population? Now, this was interesting because it's a really topical thing at the moment in the profession and in the world, of course, is demographic diversity. And we didn't delineate that by, say, different specific immutable characteristics. But if you look at that, it is balanced quite evenly, right? So you've got quite a difference there between those that say that it is representative and those that say it isn't. And I think that that's really interesting, not to say the least. Let me just pull that up. Look at that bottom one, right? Half of you thinking that it is representative of the general population, and half of it isn't. Now, I'd say that the data suggests that it isn't, in a sense. You know, I think that especially if you look at racial and ethnicity data, if you think about sex, there are certainly more women than men in the profession. Yeah, there's obviously only slightly more women than men in the country, in the population. So I find it interesting, and definitely something that I feel we could word questions maybe a bit better, and that's one of the things to reflect on. But also, I think it to some degree might be a bit of a proxy. If you think about what some of the things came out in the word cloud, is that there were people that were saying that they want to hear less about equality and diversity, and then there were some people that was a high priority. They want to hear more about equality and diversity and stuff. So I think that is just a societal division that then goes into our profession as well. I said profession, I mean, of course, the industry at large. Now, just finish with these. So last couple of minutes, we asked, what does Physio Matters do well? Self-indulgent question as it was. And they said, no, they like the podcast, which is great, of course. People saying that we pick current topics. We are up to date, CPD, they like providing education. Lots of people saying that they love the discussions, debates, the people. We bring the best in the business, someone was saying as well, which is great. You know, the fact that we're good at talent scouting came up, which is pleasant. What could we do better? Obviously, it was very pleasing to then hear that the most common word said when we asked what could you do, we could do better, you guys just want more. Now, I think to some degree, you can balance that out by some people said we could do less, and that generally there are some really good long form answers to this question that we learned a lot from. The thing that a lot of you had said that is you wanted clips, you wanted sort of varied content, you wanted some short form stuff, you wanted some more video. You know, this was really interesting. We got a mixed bag of things where people saying, what do we do well is to bring in the breadth of diversity across the profession. And then there's others that had said that that's something we should do better, is to have a more diverse spread demographically, a bit like that last question. And then finally, this was, I think, a free text box for anything else you'd like to say to us. And there was lots of thank yous there. And I just want to reiterate then to my team and all that work around what we do, from the sort of people that are directly working for us, the subcontractors that are casual staff that help us, the speakers who join us on podcasts or on Therapy Live events, or anyone that works anywhere around our ecosystem, which is one of my favorite words at the moment, all the interlocking different areas of our work. It's absolutely made by the people, and it's made by you guys even contributing this feedback in your hundreds to help us to reflect on it and learn from it. There's going to be more chewing it over episodes about some of the specifics of these questions. I'll be referring to some of this data as we go on into the coming weeks, but particularly the solutions that we've tried to come up with. Because when we then asked you, what should Physio Matters focus its attention on, your answers were different to what you felt the priority areas were in the industry, which I think is particularly interesting. And so whilst I don't think I have that, I think I'm holding that one back, right? I'm holding back what your answer was to what would you like Physio Matters to do. And I'm holding it back for good reason. It's because I want to get into that, because we have been working since this data came in to solve some of the problems that you've asked us to solve and solve some of those key priority areas in the industry. And so we're going to be getting into those one by one in future episodes. And please do let me know what you think. Let me know how this goes against or with any of your biases, and also let me know any guests that you want on Chewing It Over. We've got some crackers coming up, or any topics you want me to discuss. But for now, thank you. I'm pleased to be back. Hope that's been interesting, and I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks, guys. All the best.